Hi everyone, my name is Elena Clemente and I'm a research assistant at the Stockholm School of Economics. Today I'm going to talk about our paper about predicting the success of behavioral interventions. Our paper builds on a companion paper by Michel Gelfand and co-authors, which you may have seen in a separate presentation. Their paper evaluates the effectiveness of 7 nudge interventions on Republicans and Democrats in a representative US sample. They measure 4 outcomes relative to a control baseline condition, including attitudes and intentions towards mask wearing and 2 behavioral tasks. They find that Republicans hold more negative attitudes and behaviors towards mask wearing. However, none of the 7 interventions were effective at promoting mask wearing among either sample of people. Building on these results, we ask whether academics, behavioral scientists, and lay people can accurately forecast the effectiveness of each of the 7 nudges. Recent literature has shown the importance of collecting predictions for scientific outcomes. However, there is limited evidence on different types of forecasters, since most of these studies include only scientists and academics. And this is one of the first examples where they have to predict separately for Republicans and Democrats in the same context. Before running our forecasting survey, we pre-registered our hypothesis on the Open Science Framework. We collected data for a lay people sample through Qualtrics to match US demographics and political affiliations. And data for practitioners and academics was collected through academic mailing lists and social media. And then additional behavioral scientist data was collected from our UNIS partners. As a final sample, we got to more than 1,000 forecasters, including more than 50 participants for each of the 3 subgroups. In the forecasting survey, the participants were shown each of the 7 nudge messages as well as the baseline message, and they were then asked to predict both of them separately for each of the 4 outcomes in terms of coherency. And they were also asked to predict separately by the political affiliation of the person that was subject to the nudge, so either a Democrat or a Republican. In total, they provided 64 forecasts and some additional demographic items. Our first primary hypothesis was that there would be a positive relationship between predicted and realized effect sizes. We find that participants are able to predict the baseline conditions very well. However, their predictions for nudge effects are only loosely correlated with the realized results. The graph shows the average forecast and observed effect size for each of the 64 predictions that they were asked to make separately for Republicans and Democrats. We also find slightly negative and significant correlation between them between forecasted and observed effect sizes for Democrats only. Our second and third hypothesis was that participants would predict the different effect sizes for Democrats and Republicans, and they would have different accuracies based on who they were predicting about. And our fourth hypothesis was that forecasters would either under or overestimate the observed nudge effects. The graph shows each effect size, both forecasted and observed for the 7 nudge effects, as well as separately for Republicans and Democrats. We find that participants do expect nudges to work differently for Republicans and Democrats. And in particular, they overpredict the effect that they would have on Democrats, but not on Republicans. And they also show lower accuracy when predicting results for Democrats. Finally, our last hypothesis was that the accuracy of predictions would differ among lay people, academics, and practitioners. We find that lay people show higher prediction error or lower accuracy than either practitioners or academics. However, the difference between practitioners and academics is not significant. Overall, we find that participants do expect nudges to work differently on Democrats and Republicans, and they overestimate the impact that these would have on Democrats. We also find differences in forecasting abilities across the 3 groups of forecasters. However, none of them were able to predict that the nudge interventions would have no effect on mask wearing. We argue that understanding differences in forecasting abilities can help policymakers avoid costly public interventions, and we provide an example of how collaboration with behavioral science units can improve policy recommendations. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions or feedback, you can write me an email. And this is the link to our paper.